Hello everyone. So welcome to session 19 of IS Baba's rapid revision series of 500 high probable topics for prelims 2020. I'm Preetham Reddy and I'll be dealing with 15 important topics in this session which is very crucial for prelims examination this year. So in our previous session there were some corrections and clarifications. So under session 17 I had provided it as 100 springs initiative. So change it to 1000. Okay, it's a 1000 springs initiative. And during session 18 topic number 279 under Niti Aayog's SDG index, second point I had mentioned that Niti Aayog has constructed SDG India index which is spanning across 13 out of 17 SDGs. So earlier it was 13 out of 17, but right now it has been updated to 16 out of 17 SDGs. So make this change over there. So our first topic is yield curves. Yield curves is important this year because in recent months business media around the world they had displayed an unusual obsession with the curves, that is yield curves. So analysts in the US they were worrying about an inverted yield curve, saying that this was a sure sign of a coming recession, whereas in India everyone's now worrying about the opposite thing, that is an unduly steep yield curve. So let's understand what is this yield curve, why yield curve is important. So a yield curve is the graph that we get by plotting the interest rates at which a single borrower can take loans from the market for different time periods. Or in simple words I can say yield curve is a graphical representation of yields over different time horizons. Say for instance, Government of India periodically borrows money from the market through auctions of treasury bills and government securities. So if we want to plot an yield curve, we need to draw a graph through current market rates on its 91 day, 182 day and 364 days treasury bills and its 10 year, 20 year and 30 years borrowing. And usually most of the market watchers they use the spread between 1 year and 10 year borrowings to gauge the shape of a country's yield curve, because interest rate moves can tell you what will be the future health of the economy, and also the shape of the yield curve can tell us whether the markets expect interest rates to rise or fall in the future. At the same time, the government's yield curve also set the floor to all other borrowers. So we'll see different types of yield curves. Say for example steep or upward sloping yield curve. So in upward sloping yield curve, the bond investors they expect the economy to grow normally. So they would expect to be rewarded more when they lend for a longer period. So you can see the figure, if they invest, so the bond investors they expect more reward for longer period of lending. So this upward sloping yield curve is a sign that market expects interest rates to spike up sharply in future. So steepness of the yield curve determines how fast an economy is expected to grow. And when the economy is expected to grow only marginally, the yield curve is flat. Whereas in inverted yield curve, usually you can see here in the graph, there is a difference between its 2 year and 30 year treasury bill which is turned negative. So yield inversion happens when the yield on a longer tenure bond becomes less than the yield for a short term tenure bond. And a yield inversion typically means that a recession is about to come. So the investors they expect the future growth to fall sharply. So these are the three things which you have to remember. Simple questions can come. Next important topic is capital to risk weighted assets ratio. So you might be knowing about capital adequacy ratio. So capital adequacy ratio is also known as this capital to risk weighted asset ratio. In other words, the CAR or CRAR is nothing but a ratio of banks' capital to its risk weighted assets and current liabilities. So this capital adequacy ratio is decided by central banks and bank regulators to prevent commercial banks from taking excess leverage and becoming insolvent in the process. So this particular ratio is utilized to secure depositors and boost the efficiency and stability of financial systems all over the world. So this capital to risk weighted asset ratio is measured as tier 1 plus tier 2 plus tier 3 capital funds divided by risk weighted assets. That is, the risk weighted assets take into consideration credit risk, market risk, and also operational risk. And you have to remember, Basel III norms as stipulated a capital to risk weighted assets of 8%, whereas in India commercial banks are mandated to maintain minimum 9%. So 8% set by the Basel III norms. In India, for commercial banks, it is mandatory that it maintains minimum 9% of capital adequacy ratio plus capital conservation buffer of 2.5%, whereas public sector banks should maintain a minimum capital adequacy ratio of 12%. Okay, one small homework: know what is capital conservation buffer. Even a question can come on this. Okay, so in our next topic we will be dealing with one of the capital conservation buffer. So this counter cyclical capital buffer. So this counter cyclical capital buffer, it is a relatively new concept which is introduced under the international Basel III norms. So why we have to read about counter cyclical capital buffer? Because recently RBI announced that banks don't need to activate this counter cyclical capital buffer for one more year for dealing with the coronavirus led slowdown. So following Basel III norms, central banks specify certain capital adequacy norms for the banks. So you might be knowing. And this counter cyclical capital buffer is part of such capital adequacy norms and is calculated as a fixed period of a bank's risk weighted loan book. So in simple terms, CCCB, that is counter cyclical capital buffer, is the capital to be kept by a bank to meet business cycle related risks. So it is aimed to protect the banking sector against losses from some changes in the economic conditions. So regulations regarding this were set forth in the Basel III regulatory reforms created by Basel Committee on Banking Supervision. So RBI has provided a counter cyclical buffer framework. So according to this framework, it envisages the credit to GDP gap as the main indicator, which is used in conjunction with other supplementary indicators. And this framework says that it requires banks to build up a buffer of capital in good times. Okay, so with this counter cyclical capital buffer, banks are required to set aside a higher portion of their capital during good times when loans are growing rapidly, so that the capital can be released and used during bad times when there is distress in the economy. So you have to remember that. And one more important point what you have to remember is, in both capital conservation buffer and this counter cyclical capital buffer, if the minimum buffer requirement are breached, so capital distribution constraints will be imposed on the bank. So the constraints imposed relate only to the capital distributions and not the operations of the bank. So remember it. So next important topic is external benchmark based lending. See, this topic is important this year because we know that at present interest rates on loans are linked to banks' MCLR, that is banks marginal cost of fund based interest rate. Right now RBI has mandated to replace that one with this external benchmark based lending. So you might be knowing interest rates on loans are linked to banks MCLR, that is marginal cost of lending rate. So it has been observed that due to various reasons, the transmission of policy rate changes to the lending rate of banks under the current MCLR framework has not been satisfactory. Therefore, this RBI has issued a circular making it mandatory for all banks to link all its new floating rate loans. So floating rate loans given to the retail customers and floating rate loans given to the MSMEs to this external benchmark based lending, replacing the MCLR. Okay, and you have to remember banks can choose from one of the four external benchmarks. So you have to know what constitutes this external benchmark. First one is the repo rate. Second one is 3 months treasury bill yield. Third one is 6 months treasury bill yield. And fourth one is any other external bench interest rate which is published by Financial Benchmarks India Private Limited. Okay, so usually banks link their loan with the repo rate. So if the banks link their loan with the repo rate, it means that external benchmark based lending. Okay, what is the main difference between MCLR and this particular external benchmark based lending is the interest rate under external benchmark shall be reset at least once in 3 months. So this is very important. Because of this, faster transmission of monetary policy rates will happen, and you should know all these differences, which is very important. So the marginal cost of lending rate, it is linked to bank's cost of funds. However, repo linked loans will be linked to the RBI's lending rate, and usually under MCLR it takes 4 to 6 months to move after RBI rate cut. However, in repo linked loan or external benchmark, it responds immediately to the RBI's rate cut. So RBI rate cut not fully passed on the borrowers, but here rate cuts are automatically passed on, and it resets annually. Here it resets every 3 months, and it changes by just 5 to 10 BPS. However, here they are changing 25 BPS or more, and revised every month. Here revised bi-monthly, and low volatility, here high volatility. Okay, so try to remember these things, it is very important. So next important topic is facility to avail liquidity for liquidity coverage ratio, that is FAL LCR. So in order to understand FAL LCR, first we have to understand what is LCR. So LCR, it is a short term liquidity ratio to be maintained by the banks in the form of high quality liquid assets. So this LCR is nothing but a short term liquidity ratio to be maintained by the banks in the form of high quality liquid assets, so that they can survive an acute stress scenario lasting for 30 days. Okay, so LCR should be 100% or more. That is, at a minimum, the stock of liquid assets should enable the bank to survive until 30 days of the stress scenario. So by which time it is assumed that appropriate corrective actions can be taken. That's why LCR, we say that it should be 100% or more. So next is, you have to know what actually is high quality liquid asset. So high quality liquid asset, as per the Basel III, it includes assets which can be easily and immediately convertible into cash. So this would include cash and government securities. Okay, so LCR, we can consider LCR as a prudential liquidity requirement under Basel III, and already we had a similar parallel liquidity requirement for banks in India given by the RBI called statutory liquidity ratio. So now LCR is the parallel liquidity requirement which is under Basel III, whereas this SLR is liquidity requirement in India by RBI. So now we have two liquidity requirement for the banks. So what is the issue with two parallel regulations and where similar liquid assets to be maintained by the banks? So the problem is, if they are complied with together, it will substantially reduce the lending capacity of the banks. So to prevent the overlap of liquidity requirements which hamper the lending capacity of the banks, RBI has now allowed for a limited portion of government securities which were used to meet the SLR to be recognized as the high quality liquidity asset for calculating the LCR. So you have to remember two things. We have LCR and we have SLR. So now banks were required to maintain both the liquidity requirements. So now RBI is telling that some part of G-Secs which is under SLR, it can be treated as high quality liquid assets, and now this can be used as a part of LCR. So this particular government securities, they can be pledged to raise liquid assets to meet the LCR requirement under Basel III. Okay, so whatever this procedure is happening, it is called FAL LCR. So in simple, I can say FAL LCR is that part of government securities under SLR that can be pledged to raise liquid assets, or that can be pledged to act as a high quality liquidity asset to meet the LCR requirement under Basel III. Okay, so remember this particular part. So next important topic is prompt corrective action framework. So you might have read about prompt corrective action framework. It is a framework under which banks with weak financial metrics, they are put under watch by the RBI. Okay, so how we will know which are the banks which are having weak financial metrics? So it depends on certain norms, that is capital ratios, asset quality and profitability. So whichever banks have issues with maintaining the capital to risk weighted asset ratio, so if they are not maintaining the minimum CRAR which is specified by the RBI or the Basel III norms, they come under the risks, or they come under the risk threshold levels. Okay, or whichever bank whose asset quality is poor, so if their net NPAs are rising, and on profitability whose banks have negative return on assets for 2, 3 or 4 consecutive years, they will be ranked according to the threshold levels, and based on those threshold levels they will be treated as weak financial metrics. So those banks have weak financial metrics and they are put under the watch by the RBI. So remember that one. So next important topic is RBI's revised framework for the resolution of stressed assets. So RBI has now revised its framework for the resolution of stressed asset. So whatever the revised framework, it calls it as prudential framework for resolution of stress assets. So now this is the new guidelines which was issued by RBI in June 2019, and it will replace the previous stressed asset resolution which was published in the 2018. So one important or main feature of this new framework is that it relaxes several previous criteria which was related to the stressed asset management under this 2018 version. So you have to know some important things. So what are the recent changes? So before, banks had to refer borrower to NCLT. So we'll be dealing about the NCLT in next few topics. So banks had to refer borrower to this NCLT, that is National Company Law Tribunal, if it failed to resolve the account within 180 days earlier. So now lenders have been given the choice to initiate legal proceedings for insolvency or recovery. And before, the stressed asset norms were applicable only for banks. Now the norms are applicable for banks, small finance banks as well as NBFCs. So it is important, you have to know. Simple question can come. So default of even 1 day had to be reported and acted upon. Here lenders are given 30 days to start working on resolution plan from day of default. And agreement of all lenders was required on the resolution plan. Now agreement of 75% lenders by debt value and 60% lenders by numbers is needed. See, apart from this one, there are many new changes and norms under this revised framework. So go through those things because I can't explain everything here. You have to remember this framework is extended to financial institutions like scheduled commercial banks, NBFCs, small financial banks, but you have to remember it excludes regional rural banks. Okay, so go through this particular chapter, revise it. It was recently RBI has released this revised framework, so it can be important. Next important topic is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. Obviously you have been seeing this IBSC lot in the news and even in the economic survey, and we know that IBC, it provides a time bound process for resolving insolvency in companies as well as individuals, right? So IBC provides a time bound process for resolving insolvency in companies and among individuals, and government implemented this IBC to consolidate all laws related to insolvency and bankruptcy and to tackle the non performing assets. And this insolvency and bankruptcy code is quite different from the earlier resolution system, as it shifts the responsibility to the creditor to initiate the insolvency resolution process against the corporate debtor, right? So the main thing what you have to remember is the IBC shifts the responsibility to the creditor to initiate the insolvency resolution process, unlike the earlier ones. So under IBC, either the creditor, that is the bank, or the loaner, that is the defaulter, can initiate insolvency proceedings. So remember now. And when a default in repayment occurs, creditors gain control over the debtor's asset and must make decision to resolve insolvency within 180 days. And in order to ensure an uninterrupted resolution process, the IBC also provides immunity to the debtors from resolution claims of creditors during this period. Okay, so know about insolvency and bankruptcy code. Also try to know about its objectives, and questions have been already asked regarding the adjudicating authority, that is National Company Law Tribunal, and there might be a question on debt recovery tribunal. Okay, so adjudicating authority under this IBC, it falls under National Company Law Tribunal for companies and debt recovery tribunal for individuals and partnership firms. So try to remember. And one important salient feature of this IBC is it covers all individuals, companies, limited liability partnerships and partnership firms. Okay, so next important topic is NCLAT and NCLT, that is National Company Law Appellate Tribunal and National Company Law Tribunal. So I said here that adjudicating authority will be this NCLT. So we'll see. So Companies Act, actually 2002 Companies Act, it provided for the setting up of NCLT and NCLAT. Then Companies Act, it replaced the existing Company Law Board and Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, and it has brought in this NCLT and NCLAT. So this NCLT, that is National Company Law Tribunal, it is a quasi judicial body that adjudicates issues relating to companies in India. So the setting up of NCLT as a specialized institution for corporate justice is based on the recommendations of the Justice Eradi Committee recommendations. One important topic what you have to remember is initially Companies Act 2002 provided for setting up of NCLAT and NCLT. However, central government, it constituted both NCLT and NCLAT under Companies Act 2013. NCLT will act as a quasi-judicial body that adjudicates issues relating to companies in India. NCLAT hears appeals against the order of NCLT. Okay, and no civil court shall have jurisdiction to entertain any suits or proceedings, and decision of NCLT may be appealed to the NCLAT, and further the decision of NCLAT can be appealed to the Supreme Court. So you have to remember this. So know about the difference between NCLT and NCLAT. Next important topic is Debts Recovery Tribunal. So Debts Recovery Tribunal, I said like here, usually this NCLAT is for companies and LLPs, that is limited liability partnership. Here Debt Recovery Tribunal, it deals with the individuals and partnership firms. So we'll see Debts Recovery Tribunal. So it was established to facilitate the debt recovery involving banks and other financial institutions with their customers. And the primary goal and function of this Debt Recovery Tribunal is to recover the loaned money from borrowers. So the main goal is to recover loaned money from borrowers which is owed to banks and financial institutions from the customers. And these debt recovery tribunals, they were set up after the passing of Recovery of Debts due to Banks and Financial Institutions Act. So this Recovery of Debts due to Banks and Financial Institution Act, it empowered the central government to establish this DRTs, that is Debt Recovery Tribunals. And even SARFAESI Act also provides access to establishing DRTs. And one important thing to notice, the power of the tribunal is restricted to setting down the cases concerning the recovery of the due amount from the non-performing assets as affirmed by the banks as per the RBI guidelines. And DRT, it is usually presided over a presiding officer who is appointed by the central government and who shall be qualified to be the district judge. Okay, and the tribunal has the power bestowed with the district court, and their DRTs are fully empowered to pass comprehensive orders and can travel beyond the civil procedure code to render complete justice. And appeals against the orders passed by DRT, it lies before the Debts Recovery Appellate Tribunal. Just like NCLAT, we have DRAT. Okay, so next important topic is PM Kisan Sampada Yojana. So recently Government of India, it approved around 27 integrated cold chain development projects under this PM Kisan Sampada Yojana. We'll see what is this PM Kisan Sampada Yojana. It's a central sector scheme. So it's a central sector scheme for agro-marine processing and development of agro-processing clusters with an allocation of 6,000 crore for the period 2016 to 20, co-terminus with the 14th Finance Commission cycle. And this particular PM Kisan Sampada Yojana was approved by the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs in 2017, and it is implemented by Ministry of Food Processing Industries. And schemes implemented under PM Kisan Sampada Yojana you should be knowing, like mega food parks, integrated cold chain and value addition infrastructures, infrastructures for agro processing clusters, creation of forward and backward linkages, food safety and quality assurance infrastructure, human resources and institutions, financial allocation. So all those schemes come under this PM Kisan Sampada Yojana, and PM Kisan Sampada Yojana is now acting as an umbrella scheme. So next important topic is Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. So Matsya, that is fisheries. So this Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana is a flagship scheme for focused and sustainable development of fisheries sector in the country, with an estimated investment of rupees 20,050 crores and ranging over the period of 5 years, that is from 2020 to 2025, in all the states and UTs as a part of Atmanirbhar Bharat package. Okay, so it is the part of Atmanirbhar Bharat package, and you have to remember, out of 20,050 crore, 12,340 crores for beneficiary oriented activities in marine, inland fisheries and aquaculture, and about 7,710 crores investment for fisheries infrastructure. So the majority is given to the beneficiary oriented activities. Okay, and this particular Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana, it aims at enhance fish production by an additional 70 lakhs ton by 2024-2025, and to increase fisheries export earnings and to double income of the fisheries and fish farmers, Ashok Dalwai committee recommendation, and reducing post harvest losses from 20 to 25% to about 10%. Okay, and this Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana, the scheme primarily focuses on adopting cluster or area based approaches and creation of fisheries clusters through backward and forward linkages. So next important topic is Agriculture Infrastructure Fund. So PM has launched a new central scheme of financing facility under the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund of rupees 1 lakh crore. Okay, so you have to remember, it's a new central sector scheme where medium and long term debt financing, it acts as a medium and long term debt financing facility, and this Agriculture Infrastructure Fund is of rupees 1 lakh crore for investment in viable projects for post harvesting management, infrastructure and community farming assets through interest subvention and credit guarantee. So this Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, it will support farmers, it will support primary agriculture cooperatives, farmer producer organizations, agri entrepreneurs, etc. in building community farming assets as well as post harvesting agriculture infrastructure. So the duration of this particular Agriculture Infrastructure Fund or the scheme shall be from 2020 to 2029, that is 10 years. So under this scheme, rupees 1 lakh crore will be provided by banks and financial institutions as loans with interest subvention of 3% per annum and credit guarantee coverage under CGT MSE scheme for loans up to rupees 2 crores, and moratorium, like it has the provision for moratorium for repayment, and managed and monitored through an online management information system platform. So try to remember it. So next important topic is Model Code of Conduct. So the MCC, like the Election Commission itself, is a unique Indian innovation. Though just a brief set of guidelines or set of norms which are laid down by ECI, the Model Code of Conduct is a powerful instrument. Okay, and this MCC is non-statutory. So the Model Code refers to a set of norms laid by ECI with the consensus of political parties, and it is not statutory. So it spells out the do's and don'ts for the election. And this MCC comes into force when the Election Commission of India, it announces the election dates. So the code comes into force on the announcement of the poll schedule and remains operation till the process is concluded. And important, you have to note that the election commission ensures that ruling parties at the center and in states adhere to the code as part of its mandate to conduct free and fair elections under Article 324 of the Constitutions. And in case of any electoral offences, election commission takes action against the violators, and anyone can report the violation to the election commission or approach the court. So do remember about model code of conduct and powers of election commission. So next important topic is Buddhist site at Panigiri. So archaeologists in Telangana recently unearthed a rare treasure in the form of a life-sized stucco sculpture from this Buddhist site at Panigiri, Telangana. So it is the biggest stucco sculpture found in the country so far, and the life-size figurine found in the excavation is thought to represent one of the Bodhisattva in the Jataka Chakra. Apart from the life-size stucco, a Mahastupa, upsidal Chaitya Grihas, votive stupas, pillared congregation of halls were also found. And they are said to belong to the Satavahana period from the 1st century BC, and the Mahastupa is considered as Paribhogika Stupa, which contains the personal belongings of the Buddhist monks, a practice that was prevalent during the Ashoka period and continued till the 4th century AD. So let's know about Bodhisattva. So in early Buddhism, Bodhisattva meant the previous life of a Buddha. In Mahayana Buddhism, Bodhisattva refers to a human being committed to the attainment of enlightenment for the sake of others. So becoming a Bodhisattva is the goal of the Mahayana Buddhism. And Bodhisattva may also refer in Mahayana Buddhism to archetypal Bodhisattvas, that is mythical beings such as Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri, who are objects of devotion to protect wildlife as summer peaks. Okay, so know about this one, and there are some important facts which are provided in this figure, so try to read and revise this particular topic, which is important. Thank you, and do subscribe to the channel and do comment if you have any queries.